The house was silent, except for the muffled laughter spilling from the upstairs bedroom. My hand trembled on the cold steel of the revolver, tucked neatly inside my jacket. I'd spent weeks unraveling the tangled web of deceit Beth had spun. Every excuse, every late-night errand, every poorly disguised lie led me to this moment. When I kicked open the door, the scene froze as though I had hit pause on a tawdry soap opera. Beth was standing in front of the bed, wearing his shirt, a plain, wrinkled blue button-up, like something out of a cheap department store. Justin, her lover, was scrambling for his pants, tripping over his feet like a half-drunk fool. The revolver came out of my jacket, and I smiled, a cold, calculated expression that carried no humor. Justin froze, his hands in the air like I was some kind of sheriff. Beth's jaw dropped. "Don't hide, Justin," I said, my voice even, dangerous. "You think that if you cover yourself, you're not guilty? Face your death like a man." Beth started to stammer, her hands trembling as she tried to button up his shirt. "Ryan, listen, this isn't." "Save it," I snapped, cutting her off. "Let's skip the usual excuses, Beth. You two chose a perfect, remote spot for your rendezvous. Nice and quiet, out here in the middle of nowhere. So when I shoot you, your bodies likely won't ever be found." Justin's face turned white as a sheet. Beth's wide-eyed panic betrayed her thoughts. Was I serious? Could I pull the trigger? For weeks, I'd asked myself that same question. When the truth first hit me, when the undeniable proof of her betrayal stared back at me, I'd fantasized about revenge. Not just on him, but on her, the woman I'd devoted years to, who'd turned my life into a sick joke. "Ryan, please, just let me explain," Beth begged, tears pooling in her eyes. It was a pathetic performance, worthy of an award if I hadn't known better. "It's not what you think. I swear. Not what I think." I barked a laugh, sharp and bitter. "Beth, you're standing here in another man's shirt, while your boyfriend here can't even figure out how to put his pants on. So enlighten me, what exactly am I thinking that's so wrong?" Justin finally found his voice. "Man, I don't want any trouble." I turned the gun toward him. "Shut up. You stopped wanting trouble when you decided to sleep with my wife." The room fell silent again. The weight of my words, the gun, the situation, it all bore down on the three of us. Beth sniffled, trying to inch closer to me, but I raised the gun higher, forcing her to stop in her tracks. "You know what's funny?" I said, addressing no one in particular. "I actually believed you, Beth. Every time you said you were working late, every fake smile you flashed when you came home hours after dinner. I bought it. Like a fool." Her lips quivered. "Ryan, please. You ruined everything." My voice cracked, and I hated myself for it. I didn't want her to see me vulnerable, not now. Not after what she'd done. For a moment, my mind raced with possibilities. I could shoot them both. Walk away and disappear into the night. Or maybe I'd leave one alive, let them suffer, knowing the other was gone because of their betrayal. But as my finger hovered over the trigger, something shifted inside me. I didn't want their blood on my hands. Not yet. No, I wanted answers first. I wanted the truth stripped bare, no lies, no rehearsed performances. "Get dressed," I said finally, lowering the gun slightly. "Both of you. We're going downstairs to talk." Beth blinked, confused, as though she hadn't heard me correctly. "What?" "You heard me," I snapped. "Get dressed. Now." Justin moved first, fumbling to pull on his jeans and grab his shoes. Beth hesitated, her mind clearly racing with ways to manipulate the situation. But when I raised the gun again, her hesitation evaporated, and she reached for her clothes. As they dressed, I leaned against the doorway, the gun still in my hand. My mind was a storm: anger, betrayal, disbelief, and a gnawing curiosity about just how far this had gone. When they were ready, I gestured toward the door. Downstairs. Don't even think about running. Beth glanced at Justin, her eyes full of unspoken fear. He didn't look back. The coward had nothing to offer her now, not when the reality of his actions was staring him down. I followed them down the stairs, my footsteps heavy on the old wooden floor. The weight of what I was about to do pressed down on me, but I wasn't stopping now. I had questions. And by the time the night was over, I would have my answers. Or there would be hell to pay. The three of us stood in the living room, the air thick with tension. Beth perched on the edge of the couch, wringing her hands like some distressed damsel in an old movie. Justin, the spineless idiot, stood by the fireplace, looking like he wanted to melt into the brickwork. I sat opposite them, the revolver resting on my lap, a silent reminder that their options were limited. "Start talking," I said, my voice cold, detached. "No lies, Beth. I've had enough of those to last a lifetime." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her gaze flicked to Justin, like she was looking for backup, but he was too busy studying the floor. Pathetic. "Ryan," she started, her voice trembling. It wasn't planned, okay? It just happened." I barked a laugh, cutting her off. "It just happened? That's your excuse? What, you tripped and fell onto him?" "That's not fair," she snapped, her voice rising. "You don't understand." "Then help me understand," I interrupted, leaning forward. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife decided to turn our marriage into a joke. So go ahead, Beth. Enlighten me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't falling for it this time. I'd seen this act before, the wide-eyed innocence, the trembling lip. It had worked on me for years, but now it only fueled my anger. "Fine," she spat, her tone sharp. "You want the truth? Here it is. I was bored, Ryan. Bored out of my mind. You stopped trying a long time ago. It's like you were just going through the motions, work, eat, sleep. Rinse and repeat." Justin made me feel alive again. Alive. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I forced myself to stay calm. "And the solution to your boredom was to sleep with another man? To destroy everything we built together?" "You weren't listening to me," she shot back, her voice breaking. "I tried, Ryan. I tried to tell you how unhappy I was, but you didn't care. You were too busy with your own life to notice. That was a lie, and we both knew it. I'd worked long hours, sure, but it was for us, for our future." She used to say she understood, that she appreciated my hard work. Apparently, that appreciation didn't extend to keeping her vows. I turned to Justin, who flinched under my gaze. "And you? What's your excuse? Or are you just the kind of guy who gets off on screwing another man's wife?" "Look, man, I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, his voice shaky. "Beth, she came to me, okay? She said things were bad between you two, that she needed someone to talk to. I was just trying to help." "Help?" I repeated, my tone dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what you call it? Helping?" He stammered something unintelligible, and I resisted the urge to smack him across the face. Instead, I focused on Beth, who was glaring at me like I was the villain in this story. "You know what hurts the most?" I said, my voice quieter now. "It's not just the betrayal. It's the fact that you didn't even have the decency to be honest about it. All those lies, Beth. All those nights I sat at home, thinking you were working late, or out with friends. And the whole time, you were with him." She had the nerve to look indignant. "Oh, so now this is all my fault? You're not even going to take any responsibility for your part in this?" "My part?" I stood, the revolver still in my hand, and she flinched. Don't you dare try to turn this around on me. I wasn't the one sneaking around, lying to my spouse. I wasn't the one tearing apart our marriage piece by piece. Justin took a step back, raising his hands. Hey, man, just calm down, okay? Nobody needs to get hurt. I rounded on him, the barrel of the gun pointing at his chest. Nobody needs to get hurt. You've already done enough damage, Justin. The least you can do is shut up and let me finish. He froze, his face pale, and I turned back to Beth. So tell me, Beth. How long has this been going on? Weeks? Months? Her silence was answer enough. My stomach turned as the realization hit me. This wasn't a one-time mistake. This was a full-blown affair, carefully hidden, meticulously planned. Unbelievable, I muttered, pacing the room. I gave you everything, Beth. I trusted you, loved you, and this is how you repay me? I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said, my tone sharp. Sorry doesn't erase the lies, the betrayal. Sorry doesn't bring back the years I wasted on you. The weight of it all pressed down on me, threatening to crush me. But I couldn't let it. Not yet. I needed to decide what came next. Looking at them both, Beth, the woman I thought I knew, and Justin, the spineless coward who helped her destroy my life, I felt a flicker of clarity. I'm done talking, I said, heading for the door. You two stay here. Don't move. We're far from finished. Their silence followed me as I stepped outside, the cool night air hitting my face. My mind raced with possibilities, each more chaotic than the last. But one thing was clear, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The night air was cool and heavy, but it did little to calm the storm inside me. I stood on the porch, gripping the revolver as if it were the only anchor in a world that had lost all sense. My breath came fast, and my mind raced. I didn't know what I would do next, but the thought of simply walking away felt like admitting defeat. Then I heard it, a noise behind me, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. My jaw tightened as I turned, expecting to see Justin or Beth trying to make a run for it. Instead, a man stepped out of the shadows. He was tall, his silhouette partially obscured by the dim light of the porch lamp. He wore a dark jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, but even from a distance, I recognized him. My heart dropped into my stomach. It was Steve, Beth's brother. Ryan, he said, his voice calm but edged with tension. I think we need to talk. I didn't lower the gun. What the hell are you doing here, Steve? Beth called me, he admitted, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. She said things were getting out of control and asked me to come. I narrowed my eyes, trying to process what this meant. She called you? When? While I was standing in the damn room? He nodded, his expression unreadable. She slipped her phone into her pocket and texted me when you weren't looking. I came as fast as I could. Of course, she did. Beth had always been resourceful, especially when it came to covering her own skin. I laughed bitterly. So what's your plan, Steve? Talk me down? Make me the bad guy here? I'm not here to take sides, he said, stepping closer. I just want to make sure nobody does anything they'll regret. Too late for that, I muttered. Steve sighed, running a hand over his face. Look, Ryan, I get it. I really do. But waving that gun around isn't going to fix anything. You think I don't know that? I snapped, my voice rising. But what else am I supposed to do, Steve? Just sit back and let them walk all over me? No, he said firmly. But there are better ways to handle this. Ways that don't end with you behind bars, or worse. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truth. He was right, of course. I knew that. But knowing it didn't make it any easier to put the gun down. Before I could respond, the door creaked open behind me. I turned to see Beth standing there, her face pale and tear-streaked. "Ryan," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Please. Let's just talk. No more threats, no more fighting. Just talk." The nerve of her, standing there like the wounded party, like I hadn't walked in on her and Justin half-naked in our bed. But something in her tone stopped me from telling her to go to hell. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the faintest flicker of hope that there was still some explanation I hadn't considered. I glanced back at Steve, who nodded slightly. Reluctantly, I lowered the gun, though I kept it in my hand. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "Talk." Beth hesitated, glancing at Steve before stepping outside. She crossed her arms, shivering slightly in the cool night air. "I'm sorry," she began. "You said that already," I snapped. "Try something new." Her eyes darted to Steve again, and for a moment, I wondered if this whole thing was some kind of setup. But then she took a deep breath, as though steeling herself for what was coming next. "There's more to this than you think," she said finally. I frowned, my grip tightening on the gun. "What the hell does that mean?" She hesitated, her gaze flicking to Steve again. "Tell him," he said quietly. Beth swallowed hard, then looked back at me. "Justin, he's not just some random guy. He's..." She trailed off, as if the words were physically painful to say. "Spit it out, Beth," I growled. She looked down at her feet. "He's my ex." The world seemed to tilt beneath me. "Your ex?" I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "From before I met you. I didn't think I'd ever see him again, but, a few months ago, we ran into each other. It started as just catching up, but then..." She didn't have to finish the sentence. I knew exactly what "then" meant. My hands shook as the betrayal cut even deeper. It wasn't just some fling, it was a deliberate choice, a calculated decision to rekindle something she'd left behind. Steve stepped forward, his hand still raised. "Ryan, I know this is a lot to take in, but you need to calm down." "Calm down?" I barked a laugh, the sound harsh and hollow. "How the hell am I supposed to calm down, Steve? My wife has been lying to me for months, cheating on me with her ex, and you want me to just, what? Let it go?" "I'm not saying that," he said carefully. "But you need to think about what you're doing. If you lose control now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." For a moment, I considered his words. Then I turned to Beth, my eyes blazing with fury. "You didn't just betray me," I said, my voice shaking. "You betrayed us. Everything we built, every promise we made. And for what? A taste of something old and stale?" She flinched, but I didn't care. The damage was done. And as I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, one thing became painfully clear. This wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of everything. The weight of Beth's betrayal, her lies, and her audacity to call her ex back into her life hung in the air, choking any shred of sympathy I might have felt. But just as I was about to unload every ounce of anger bubbling inside me, a flicker of something crossed her face, hesitation. Fear. It wasn't guilt, it was deeper, more primal. "Ryan," she said, her voice barely audible, "there's something else you don't know." I gritted my teeth, barely holding back my rage. "More secrets, Beth? More lies? Go on. Let's hear the grand finale." Her hands trembled as she twisted the hem of her shirt, her eyes darting between me and Steve. For a moment, it looked like she might chicken out. Then she took a shaky breath and said the words that made my blood run cold. "I'm pregnant." The world stopped. My grip on the revolver slackened as the words echoed in my head. Pregnant. Of all the things she could have said, that was the last thing I'd expected. The silence stretched, the weight of her revelation suffocating us all. Finally, I managed to choke out, "What?" She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "I just found out a few weeks ago. And you're telling me this now?" My voice was rising again, fury giving way to disbelief. "After I walk in on you and Justin? After you drag your brother into this mess? You decide now's the time to drop this bombshell?" Steve cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "Ryan, maybe we should all take a step back. Stay out of this, Steve." I snapped, cutting him off. "This is between me and her." Beth finally met my eyes, her expression a mixture of shame and defiance. "I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared." "Scared of what?" I demanded. "That I'd figure out it might not even be mine?" Her silence was deafening. I staggered back a step, the full weight of her betrayal crashing down on me like a tidal wave. "Oh, my God. You don't even know, do you? You don't know if it's mine or his." Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't deny it. "That's it," I said, my voice cold and flat. "I'm done. Whatever we had, it's over. You and your baby can go to hell." I turned to leave, but Steve stepped in front of me, his hands raised defensively. "Ryan, wait. You don't understand." "I understand enough," I snapped, shoving past him. "Now get out of my way." "Ryan, listen," he shouted, his voice carrying an edge of desperation. "This isn't just about Beth or Justin. It's bigger than that. They're involved in something dangerous." I froze, narrowing my eyes at him. "What the hell are you talking about?" He glanced over his shoulder at Beth, who was shaking her head furiously, as if willing him to stop. But Steve ignored her. "Beth and Justin, they've been mixed up in some bad stuff," he said, lowering his voice. "It's not just an affair, Ryan. They've been laundering money." My jaw dropped. "What?" "Justin works for a private firm that handles offshore accounts," Steve explained quickly. "Beth's been helping him move money under the radar, using her access at the bank. I didn't know until a few days ago, but it's serious, Ryan. If this gets out, they're both going to prison." I turned to Beth, who looked like a cornered animal. "Is this true?" I demanded. She hesitated, then nodded, her face crumpling. "Unbelievable," I muttered, running a hand through my hair. "So this wasn't just some sleazy affair, it was a full-blown criminal operation." "I didn't have a choice," Beth said, her voice trembling. "Justin threatened me. He said if I didn't help him, he'd tell the bank I was stealing from them." "Were you?" She hesitated again, and I knew the answer before she said it. "It was just a little at first," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think anyone would notice. But then Justin found out and things spiraled. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The woman I thought I knew had not only betrayed me but dragged herself into a criminal conspiracy. And now she wanted me to understand? To forgive her? This just keeps getting better," I said, laughing bitterly. "What's next, Beth? Are you going to tell me you're on the run from the FBI?" Her silence was answer enough. I stared at her, my chest tightening. "You're kidding. Please, for the love of God, tell me you're kidding." "They're investigating Justin's firm," she said, her voice trembling. "If they find out I'm involved." I didn't let her finish. "You've got to be kidding me," I repeated, pacing the porch. "You dragged me into this. You dragged our life, our marriage, into your mess, and now you're asking me to help you?" "I didn't want to," she sobbed. "But I didn't know what else to do." I stopped pacing, leveling her with a cold glare. Here's what you're going to do, Beth. You're going to tell the truth. To me, to the FBI, to whoever the hell you need to. But don't expect me to save you. You made this mess. You can deal with the consequences. Her face crumpled, and she collapsed onto the porch, sobbing uncontrollably. I turned to Steve, who looked as though he wanted to be anywhere else. You knew about this, and you didn't say anything? I didn't know what to do, he admitted, his voice low. I shook my head, disgusted. You're all the same. Cowards, liars, every last one of you. With that, I walked off into the night, leaving them to their mess. But as I stepped into the darkness, one thought lingered: this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The walk away from the house felt like liberation and imprisonment at the same time. Every step further from Beth and her web of lies eased the suffocating pressure in my chest, but it also deepened the pit of uncertainty swallowing me whole. The revolver felt heavy in my hand, a symbol of everything I wanted to leave behind but couldn't. I made it to my truck, threw the gun on the passenger seat, and sat there, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands. My thoughts raced, too tangled to make sense of. Pregnant. Money laundering. The FBI. Each revelation had been like a hammer to the chest, leaving me breathless and battered. I started the engine and drove aimlessly, the cool night air rushing through the open window. I needed space to think, to figure out what to do next. The idea of going home, our home, felt impossible. The walls would still echo with her betrayal. Instead, I pulled into a roadside diner, one of those 24-hour places with flickering neon signs and questionable coffee. The parking lot was empty except for a beat-up sedan and a semi-truck idling in the corner. I slid into a booth by the window, ordering black coffee I didn't intend to drink. As I stared at the mug, trying to piece together a plan, the bell above the door jingled. A man in a suit walked in, his polished shoes clicking against the tile floor. He was out of place in this dingy little diner, but he didn't seem to care. He walked straight to my booth and sat down across from me, uninvited. "Ryan Miller," he said, his voice calm and measured. My stomach tightened. "Who's asking?" He reached into his jacket and pulled out a badge, flashing it quickly before tucking it away again. "Agent Carter, FBI." The room seemed to tilt. I leaned back in my seat, crossing my arms. "If this is about Beth, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'm not involved in whatever mess she's made." Agent Carter studied me, his dark eyes sharp and assessing. "We know you're not directly involved, Mr. Miller. But your wife is, and that makes you a person of interest." I laughed bitterly. "You're late to the party, Agent. She already admitted everything. I walked in on her and her accomplice, Justin, just a few hours ago." Carter raised an eyebrow. "So, you're aware of Justin Collins?" "Yeah, I'm aware. He's her ex-boyfriend and her partner in crime. What do you want me to do about it?" The agent leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Justin Collins isn't just her ex, Mr. Miller. He's a key figure in an ongoing investigation into a criminal syndicate specializing in financial fraud. He's dangerous, and anyone associated with him is at risk." "Dangerous?" I scoffed. The guy couldn't even keep his pants on when I walked in. He didn't look dangerous to me. "You'd be surprised," Carter said grimly. "We've been tracking him for months, but he's slippery. Always manages to stay one step ahead." "What does any of this have to do with me?" I asked, my frustration mounting. Carter straightened, pulling a folder from his briefcase and sliding it across the table. "We believe your wife knows more than she's telling you, or us. We think she's been helping Justin hide evidence, possibly even laundering money through your accounts." My blood ran cold. "My accounts? Are you serious?" He nodded. "We need your cooperation, Mr. Miller. If you can give us access to your financial records, it might help us trace the money and build a case against Collins. I stared at the folder, my mind spinning. This was bigger than I'd thought. Beth hadn't just betrayed me, she'd put me in the crosshairs of a federal investigation. Why should I help you? I asked, my voice low. What's in it for me? Carter's expression softened slightly. If you cooperate, we can protect you. Ensure you're not implicated in any of this mess. And if your wife is charged, we can consider leniency if she's willing to testify against Collins. I snorted. Leniency? For her? After everything she's done? Think about it, Mr. Miller, Carter said, standing up and adjusting his suit. You have a choice. You can walk away from this clean, or you can let it drag you down with them. The decision is yours. He left the folder on the table and walked out, leaving me alone with my swirling thoughts and the weight of a decision I didn't want to make. I opened the folder, scanning the documents inside. They detailed wire transfers, offshore accounts, and a timeline of transactions that pointed directly back to Beth and Justin. The evidence was damning. As I sat there, staring at the proof of her betrayal, a thought crept into my mind, an idea I hadn't considered before. What if I didn't just help the FBI? What if I used this to my advantage? Beth had played me for a fool, but now I held the upper hand. I could expose her, destroy her world the way she destroyed mine. The thought sent a cold thrill through me. But it wasn't just about revenge. It was about survival. If I didn't act, Beth's lies could ruin me, too. I closed the folder, a sense of clarity settling over me. It was time to take control of the narrative. Beth had made her choices. Now it was time for me to make mine. The next morning, I woke up with a purpose, something I hadn't felt in what seemed like forever. Sitting in that diner with Agent Carter's folder in my hands had shifted something inside me. I wasn't just going to be a bystander in my own life anymore, I was going to make things right, on my terms. I spent the morning poring over the documents. Every line, every transaction painted a clearer picture of Beth and Justin's scheme. It was intricate, almost brilliant in its execution. If I hadn't been married to the mastermind, I might have even been impressed. But this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my name, my life, and my future. And I wasn't about to let Beth and her sleazy accomplice take any more from me. By midday, I'd decided on a plan. It was risky, sure, but I wasn't in the mood to play it safe. I called Agent Carter and agreed to cooperate under one condition: I'd meet with Beth and Justin one last time to confront them, but I wanted the FBI to have my back. We'll be there, Carter assured me. But Ryan, don't try to play the hero. If things go south, you let us handle it. I didn't respond. By the time evening rolled around, I found myself parked outside Justin's apartment complex. It was a swanky place on the edge of town, all glass and steel with a doorman at the entrance. The kind of place that screamed dirty money. The FBI had wired me up with a small microphone hidden under my shirt. They were parked discreetly a block away, ready to swoop in if things got messy. But something told me Justin wasn't the type to resort to violence, not directly, anyway. He preferred manipulation, control, pulling strings from the shadows. I stepped out of the truck, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. This was it. The doorman barely glanced at me as I strode past him into the building. I took the elevator up to the penthouse, each floor ticking by like the countdown to a bomb. When the doors slid open, Beth was standing there, her arms crossed and her face a mask of irritation. "What the hell are you doing here, Ryan?" she demanded, her voice low but sharp. I stepped out of the elevator, meeting her glare with one of my own. "We need to talk. All of us." Her eyes flicked to the hallway behind her, and I followed her gaze to see Justin leaning against the doorway of his apartment, a smug grin on his face. "Well, look who decided to join us," Justin said, his tone dripping with condescension. Couldn't stay away, could you? I ignored him, keeping my focus on Beth. You owe me the truth, I said. The whole truth. Beth hesitated, glancing back at Justin as if seeking his approval. That was all the confirmation I needed. She was in too deep, too tangled in his web to think for herself anymore. Justin pushed off the doorframe and sauntered over, his grin widening. What's there to say, Ryan? You already know everything, don't you? Beth and we've got something real. Something you could never understand. My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. This isn't about your twisted little romance, Justin. It's about the money. The FBI's onto you. His grin faltered, just for a second, before he covered it with a laugh. Nice try, but you don't scare me. You should be scared, I shot back. They've got enough evidence to put you away for a long time. And Beth? She's just as guilty. Beth paled, her tough exterior cracking. Ryan, stop. No, I interrupted, stepping closer. You stop. You think you can just lie your way out of this? Use people, manipulate them, and never face the consequences? Justin's smirk vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. You don't know who you're messing with, Miller. Actually, I do, I said, pulling out my phone. I hit play on the recording app, letting their voices fill the air. I didn't know how to tell you, Beth's voice said, trembling with fear. Justin threatened me. He said if I didn't help him. I stopped the playback and looked at them. You're both finished. This recording, the FBI's evidence, it's all coming down on you. Justin lunged forward, his face twisted with fury. You son of a... Before he could reach me, the front door burst open, and agents flooded the room. FBI. Don't move. Chaos erupted. Justin spun around, his hands raised, his cocky facade crumbling in an instant. Beth collapsed onto the couch, her face buried in her hands. Carter strode in, his expression calm but commanding. Justin Collins, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and money laundering. Justin tried to protest, but it was no use. The agents cuffed him and led him out of the apartment, his threats and curses fading down the hallway. Beth didn't say a word as they escorted her out next. She didn't look at me, didn't try to defend herself. It was over, and she knew it. As the chaos settled, Carter turned to me. You did the right thing, Ryan. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed him. Watching Beth walk away in cuffs didn't feel like justice, it felt like the end of a nightmare I'd never wanted to be a part of. But as I left the building and stepped into the cool night air, I realized something, I was free. From Beth, from Justin, from the lies and betrayal that had poisoned my life. It wasn't the ending I'd wanted, but it was the one I'd needed. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. The days following Beth's arrest were surreal. The house felt different, hollow, and eerily quiet without her presence. The realization that she was gone for good didn't hit all at once, it seeped in slowly, like a shadow spreading across my life. I wasn't sure if it was relief or regret I was feeling, but I knew one thing for certain, the storm was far from over. It started with the phone calls. The first was from Beth's lawyer, a weaselly man named Carter. The irony wasn't lost on me, who made it clear that she intended to plead not guilty. She's maintaining that she was coerced, he said. I laughed bitterly. Coerced? By who? Justin? That's her position, he replied, his tone clipped. And, Mr. Miller, I'd advise you to tread carefully. Any statements you make could be used against her in court. Tell her to save her breath, I snapped before hanging up. The next call came from Agent Carter. He wanted to meet in person to go over my testimony and discuss the case against Justin. I arrived at the FBI field office the following afternoon, a knot of anxiety tightening in my gut. Carter greeted me with a firm handshake and ushered me into a small conference room. "We've got a solid case against Collins," he said, spreading a series of documents and photos across the table. "Thanks to your cooperation, we've connected him to multiple fraudulent accounts and offshore holdings. He'll be facing a laundry list of charges." "What about Beth?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Carter hesitated. "Her involvement complicates things. While we believe she was a willing participant, she's claiming she was manipulated. She's positioning herself as a victim." "A victim?" I spat. "She lied to me for months. She laundered money through our accounts. She chose to be part of this." "I don't disagree," Carter said carefully. "But the courts might. If her defense team can prove she acted under duress, it could reduce her culpability." The weight of it all hit me like a freight train. The woman I'd loved, the woman who'd betrayed me, was still finding ways to complicate my life. "Do what you have to do," I said finally, pushing back from the table. "Just make sure she doesn't get away with it." That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the remnants of a life that no longer felt like mine. Photos of us, smiling, happy, oblivious, mocked me from the mantel. Her favorite throw blanket was still draped over the armchair, her perfume lingering faintly in the air. The memories felt like a trap, pulling me back into a past I didn't want to relive. I grabbed a box and started packing. The photos, the blanket, the little trinkets she'd scattered around the house, they all went in. I didn't care where they ended up, as long as they weren't here. As I was boxing up the last of it, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. A text from an unknown number lit up the screen. "You think you've won, but this isn't over. Watch your back." My blood ran cold. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Was it Beth? Justin? Someone else involved in their scheme? I forwarded the message to Carter, along with a curt note, "This just came through. Do you recognize the number?" His reply came within minutes, "Don't respond. We'll look into it. Stay vigilant." The next morning, I woke to the sound of breaking glass. Adrenaline surged through me as I grabbed the baseball bat I kept under the bed and crept toward the noise. The kitchen window was shattered, shards of glass glittering on the floor. A brick lay in the middle of the mess, a piece of paper tied around it with string. I carefully untied the note, my hands trembling. The message was scrawled in jagged handwriting. "You ruined everything. Payback is coming." My heart pounded in my chest. This wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. I called Carter immediately. "Someone broke into my house," I said, my voice shaking. "They left a message." "We'll send a team over," he said. "In the meantime, I want you to stay somewhere safe. Don't go back to the house until we've secured it." I packed a bag and left within the hour, checking into a motel on the edge of town. As I sat on the lumpy bed, staring at the faded wallpaper, I realized how much my life had spiraled out of control. The following day, Carter called with an update. "We traced the number from the text message," he said. "It's a burner phone, likely connected to someone in Justin's network. As for the break-in, we're running prints, but don't expect a quick answer. Whoever did this knows how to cover their tracks." "So, what am I supposed to do?" I asked, frustration bubbling over. "Hide in a motel forever?" "We're working on getting you protection," he assured me. "In the meantime, stay alert. And, Ryan, don't try to handle this on your own." But as I hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that waiting wasn't enough. I'd already been a passive player in this nightmare for too long. If I wanted to take my life back, I had to act. I spent the rest of the day making calls, tracking down old friends and contacts who owed me favors. By the time the sun set, I had a plan, a risky, reckless plan, but a plan nonetheless. Beth and Justin had underestimated me, but that was their first mistake. Their last mistake would be thinking I had nothing left to lose. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. I was back at the motel, but I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every event, every betrayal, every lie, until it felt like my thoughts were suffocating me. The threats, the break-in, the chaos, it was all connected, and I knew there was only one way to end it. I had to face Justin. The FBI had Justin locked down at a secure facility, but his network, his cronies and enablers, was still active. If I wanted any hope of living without looking over my shoulder, I had to cut the strings tying me to his mess. I called Agent Carter the next morning. "I need to meet with him," I said. "You're out of your mind," Carter replied. "Justin is dangerous, Ryan. He's a manipulator. Anything he tells you will only make things worse." "I don't care," I said firmly. "This has to end. I need answers." Carter hesitated, then sighed. "If we arrange this, it's under one condition: you don't go alone. I'll be there, and we'll have backup on site." Deal. The meeting was set for the following afternoon at a federal facility just outside town. When I arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Carter met me at the entrance, his expression stern. "You've got 10 minutes, he said. "Don't let him get in your head." I nodded, though my stomach churned with unease. Justin was seated at a metal table in the center of a sterile room, his hands cuffed in front of him. Despite his predicament, he looked annoyingly smug, like this was just another game to him. Well, if it isn't the husband of the year," he drawled as I entered. I ignored his taunt and sat across from him. "This ends now, Justin. You're going to tell me who's behind the threats." He smirked. "Why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, your life gets a whole lot worse," I said, leaning forward. "The FBI has enough on you to put you away for decades, but if you cooperate, maybe they'll go easier on you." Justin chuckled, shaking his head. "You really think you've won, don't you? Newsflash, Ryan, this isn't about you. It never was. Beth and I. We were in this long before you stumbled into our little world." His words stung, but I kept my composure. "If it's not about me, then why the threats? The break-in? Someone out there wants me dead, and you know who it is." For the first time, Justin's smirk faltered. He leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "You're in over your head," he said finally. "There are people involved in this who don't take kindly to loose ends. Beth was one of them. Now you're another." The implication hit me like a punch to the gut. "Beth set me up?" "She didn't have much of a choice," Justin said, his tone almost sympathetic. "She thought she could outsmart them, but they don't play by the same rules." My fists clenched. "Who are they?" Justin hesitated, then leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. "If I tell you, I'm dead. But I'll give you a name: Victor Novak. He's the one pulling the strings. You want this to end? You find him." The name sent chills down my spine. Novak was notorious, a ghost in the criminal underworld. Finding him would be next to impossible, but it was my only chance. When I relayed the information to Carter, he looked grim. "Novak's no joke," he said. "If Justin's telling the truth, you're dealing with someone who doesn't leave loose ends." "I don't care," I said. "I just want my life back." Carter sighed. "We'll dig into Novak, but you need to be careful. Don't do anything reckless." The next few days were a blur of anxiety and planning. I couldn't stay at the motel forever, but going home didn't feel safe either. Carter's team kept tabs on Novak's network, but leads were sparse. Then, one evening, I got a call from an unknown number. "You've been asking the wrong questions," a deep voice said. "Who is this?" I demanded. "You know who," the voice replied. Meet me at the old shipping yard tonight. Come alone, or don't come at all. The line went dead. I knew it was a trap, but I didn't care. I drove to the shipping yard, my heart pounding with every mile. When I arrived, the place was deserted, the only sounds the distant hum of machinery and the occasional creak of metal. A figure emerged from the shadows, Victor Novak. "You've caused me a lot of trouble, Mr. Miller," he said, his voice cold. "You ruined my life," I shot back. Novak smirked. "Your life was already broken. I just gave it a little push." Before I could respond, headlights flooded the area. FBI agents swarmed in, shouting commands. Novak's men appeared from the shadows, guns drawn, but they were no match for the agents. In the chaos, Novak tried to escape, but I intercepted him, slamming him against a shipping container. "This ends now," I growled. Novak laughed, even as the agents cuffed him. "You think this is over? You have no idea what you've started." As the dust settled, Carter approached me. "You did good, Ryan," he said. But I didn't feel good. Novak was in custody, but his words lingered like a dark cloud. Weeks later, as I stood on my porch, watching the sunrise, I felt a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. The nightmare was over, for now, but the scars remained. I'd lost so much, but I'd also gained something, the strength to move forward, no matter what. Beth, Justin, Novak, they were part of my past. My future was mine to reclaim.